joined by Simon McGlone from Transport for the North, who is the Senior Major Roads Planning and Strategy Officer there. What are your plans for EVs as a whole strategy?
We published our electric vehicle charging infrastructure framework last week. And the real focus of this is to ensure an efficient, attractive, inclusive network that supports the whole highways network across the north, across the region, and supports those transport decarbonisation ambitions that we all have. So up front and centre, the framework highlights some really significant scaling up of charging infrastructure across the region that's needed. We highlight that in 2030, we need around 161,000 charge points total. And when you look at that, a weekly deployment between now and 2025, that's around 470 charge points per week. Between 2025 and 2030, that rises to 620 per week. So really significant numbers here and a real scale and pace that we need to crack on with in terms of deploying our whole network of charging.
And if I try and zoom you in a bit more on the commercial vehicle logistics side, what do you expect there? What are the plans there?
So when we look at our highways network as a whole, around 97% of personal journeys are on the highways network, and around 88% are freight movements are on the highways network as well. So the roads are really key for that economic underpinning across the region. But it does carry that emissions piece as well. So I think around a quarter of UK road emissions are on the roads in the north, and that's around 6% of the total UK emissions as well. So it's a big emissions piece that we need to tackle. Modelling behind the EV charging framework accounts for the movements of car, van and HGV. So particularly the van and the HGV is obviously the key one there. And we can do that right across the whole network, as I suggested before, so we can understand what those logistics and supply chain movements mean for our charging. It's likely to mean a mixture of charging categories. We will see rapid charge points, which are regularly around 50 kilowatt sort of powers. You charge within half an hour or just a bit more. Depot charging is really key, obviously, for the logistics sector, warehousing and clustering of activities, and how you plan that around the charging network to support that is really key. So our work, if you go online, you can go on to our interactive tool and you can start plotting out, you can filter for HGV depots, and we can understand perhaps how many different connections we need for depot charging there. And then the third one is really about slower charging at destination, and that's probably the one carrying the most uncertainty right now that we hope our tool can help us navigate. So I'm really talking about urban refueling centres, urban recharging centres, or even vans and fleets charging at destinations such as homes. And obviously that pattern is changing quite a lot post-COVID in terms of the supply chain and how that acts. So clearly the charging network needs to do the same and enable those activities as well. So we think we've got a really good, strong, robust evidence base to start plotting some of this stuff out. But I think there's actually more we can do now that we've got the tool published and the strategy out there to engage with fleets and the commercial sector to understand what they're seeing in their day-to-day activities and really plan a network that supports that, because clearly our logistics are absolutely fundamental to everything we do across the region.
Now, how much do you expect this could cost, and where would the money come from? Do you expect that on the commercial side, companies are investing themselves, but do you expect that they would need to do even more at the moment?
So we have a cost estimate plotted out in the charging framework report that was published last week. We do this across, so at TfN we have future travel scenarios which plot out different ways that the travel behaviour might change over the future years. And that gives us 4 different ranges of charging deployment as well in our work, and therefore 4 different cost ranges as well. So it gives us a bit of a resilience. You're talking about 930 million, 1.3 billion in the time between 25 and 2030. By 2030 to 2035, that rises to 1.7 billion. That cost covers hardware installation, connection of new installations of charge points, maintenance. It doesn't cover the electricity grid upgrades and the network reinforcements that will also be needed to support the charging network that we're talking about here. In terms of the actual deployment of charge points, you tend to see three different ownership models. You could see a public ownership model, which is quite often a local authority taking control of the connection, managing the connection, and so on and so forth. A concessionary model, which is perhaps a middle ground between public and private, where you share the risk and the financing benefits and the risk of those. And then a fully funded model, which is, we are seeing quite a lot of that in terms of private sector coming in, paying up front and managing the operational cost. There will be a mix of those three throughout the next decade. We're seeing significant private sector activity as well. And what we're really keen to do for the north of England as a region is to encourage that private sector more and more to come in to take the opportunities within the north and take advantage of the investment we think we need across the region.
What can companies do to reach out, and where do you need input from the private sector on all of this?
So I think really interestingly, publishing our evidence has generated quite a lot of interest from the private sector. So we're getting quite a lot of approaches now. And that can only be a good thing. I think encouraging those collaborations and those sharing of what are the blockers to getting investment into the region, and then tackling those in our very different ways. I think if you look at ZapMap in terms of the data that is available around deployment, it's clear that the north is slightly lagging behind other parts of the UK. So we do want to change that. We are seeing appetite from the private sector to come and invest in the region, which is fantastic. And I'd just say to them, come and get involved in the local authority frameworks, to get involved in the procurement avenues that are available across the region, and come and share with us what are you finding that is preventing us from moving ahead with this and work together. And often it comes down to a sharing of both the challenges but also the data. So I think it'd be really useful to open up as far as we can the different data and the different evidence that we've got around this issue. One particularly interesting for this call is around fleet and how we manage fleet. I think that there is a space there for us to get into whether we can understand those movements a little bit more and plug that into the work that we've done here.